Hi, I'm Larry Magid, CEO of Connect Safely, and it's my pleasure to speak with Dr. Mitchell Prinstein, who is the Chief Science Officer of the American Psychological Association. And before that, he was a professor of psychology and neuroscience at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Dr. Prinstein, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
So let's begin with some general issues of wellness, including, of course, connected technology and gaming. How can a young person use connected technology in ways that are healthy?
Well, we have to remember that the internet is not all good and it's not all bad. So it's really about selecting the right kinds of activities. We know that when kids go online to predominantly try and get lots of followers or lots of likes, doing things that really is projecting a false sense of who they are, that's generally going to be bad for them. It's also going to expose them to content that is likely going to influence their development, maybe even their brain development. But we also know that the internet provides a great opportunity to meet new people, to have conversations that express some of the hallmarks of good relationships: emotional intimacy, support, companionship. And those are good things.
You kind of hinted at this whole issue of authenticity. I mean, one of the things that happens on social media sometimes is that, and this happens to adults as well as young people, we tend to kind of try to represent our ideal self, our perfect vacation, our wonderful life, our great looks. How does that impact the way people perceive themselves and the way they perceive the people who are essentially posing for them?
Yeah, a lot of kids are reporting that they're seeing the social comparison process as being pretty toxic. Not only do they not feel very good about themselves, but they're reporting a fair amount of loneliness because they feel like they're not interacting with a real person, but this curated, filtered version of a person. As a result, a lot of kids have started to develop second profiles, what they might call a Finsta or a fake Instagram profile with a different name that allows them to really have a way of communicating with others outside of the kind of public image they put together for their real Instagram profiles.
Another question that's been kind of concerning me is this whole question of attention span. I mean, we now have TikTok where sometimes the videos are as short as 10 seconds, 15 seconds. Do you have any concern about that, about the fact that more and more content is getting compressed into shorter and shorter time periods?
We don't have a lot of great data on that yet. Certainly, anecdotally, people are saying that kids' attention spans are getting shorter and shorter, but they were saying that back in the 80s when MTV came out as well. So we don't have the data yet to show that that's the case. We do have data to demonstrate that what they're seeing online is activating some of the same regions in the brain where we see addictions. So we are seeing a tendency to want to go back and experience more and more stimuli on social media and the internet.
Let's talk a little about time management, so-called screen time. What is your sense of that, and how important is it, and are we sometimes overemphasizing it?
The literature is pretty clear that screen time in and of itself is not the problem. The relationship between how much time you spend online and a variety of indices of your own adjustment is really approaching zero. It's really more about what you do during that screen time and who you were before you logged in the first place. Those are the variables we need to be paying more attention to.
And what about the fear of missing out? There's that sense, I think, that a lot of people have, and frankly, even some adults, that you've got to constantly keep up with your stream of social media and texting and email because there's just so much important information that you just might miss.
Well, things like fear of missing out are now part of what psychologists call an overall issue with digital stress, which includes FOMO, but also all of the different things you have to be connected to at once, all of the notifications that you have to attend to within a given hour, and the extent to which you're concerned that anything you post, how will it be received? Might you get canceled, for something that you posted? Altogether, what we're seeing is about half of kids in a typical high school setting report enough digital stress that it's interfering with their lives. And those with the most digital stress are at risk for greater depression over time. So we have to understand this the way the kids do. This is very real. This is not something silly or meaningless to them. It's something that we have to help them to deal with and cope with the same way we would with any other stressor.
What are some strategies for kind of checking in with your kids? How does a parent really get a sense of what's happening with their teen or child's digital lives?
So parents really need to think about how to talk with their kids in a way that respects that they, of course, didn't grow up with this in most cases. So this is hard to talk about, but really asking kids to work with them in understanding and helping kids to talk about maybe what would you do if your friend experienced this, or what is it like when you see this online, as a way of entering into dialogues where kids can teach parents what it's like, but parents can apply the knowledge and the expertise of how to react to things appropriately and adaptively and look at the long term about how to maintain the most important values for your adjustment years down the road.
Let's talk for a moment about what we at Connect Safely call picking on peers or cyberbullying. It's a real issue, and how do people manage that when it happens to them?
I'm glad you raised it. It's a really serious concern because research is showing that the experiences that kids have with discrimination or cyber victimization online have an effect on kids' outcomes even beyond the effect of those same experiences happening offline. So there's something about how permanent and pervasive those online experiences can be that really affects kids. It's absolutely important to practice with kids. What are the things you can say in that moment that you feel confident, that you feel is important and expresses your values, and may even be more important than how many followers you get or lose for being an upstander?
Another topic we hear a lot about is addiction, and I don't know. I mean, there's controversy about whether there is even such a thing as internet addiction because it's obviously not exactly the same thing as a drug or alcohol. But where do you again draw the line between, I guess, healthy use, perhaps somewhat overuse, and then obsessive, dangerous use of the technology?
Well, the way that the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, defines a dependency on anything is the extent to which you try to stop using it and you can't stop. You can't curb that behavior as much as you would like. The extent to which either using it or making sure you have access for future use of it is interfering with your daily activities, with your hopes, with your sleep, with your work, with your social relationships. The extent to which you feel like the amount that you have to engage with it to get a positive feeling is getting higher and higher and higher. So you're developing a tolerance. If someone that they care about is starting to experience those feelings, and that's a good sign that they need to start engaging in behaviors to stop or limit their internet and social media use.
I've heard a lot of concern about violent video games, and I've heard concern ranging from it's a big deal to it's not a big deal to it depends on whether it's a big deal. What's your sense about young people who are exposed to violence or, for that matter, sexuality in video games?
The research on this is very mixed. It does seem that we have to pay attention to that variable in the context of who that child is before they saw that information and what's happening in their lives that might either support and reinforce what they're seeing online or not. So, just a video game all by itself doesn't tell us enough information to be able to decide whether that's harmful or innocuous.
So, to sum it all up, I mean, if you take a look at the population of young people as a whole, and I know you can't speak for every young person, but are you optimistic, pessimistic? I mean, what would you tell to the kind of random parent out there, not one who comes to you and says, oh, horrible things are happening, but just one who says, my kid's on social media, my kid's playing a lot of games, I'm concerned. What would you say to either reassure them or alarm them or equip them to kind of help manage their child's online use?
I would say that I am very pessimistic when I hear of families where kids have unrestricted use of the internet and social media without conversations about what kids are consuming and how to understand what they're doing or what others are doing online. However, I'm very optimistic when I think about a way of using social media in moderation with a lot of parent to child dialogue to help process what it is that they're seeing.
Well, on that optimistic note, I'm going to say thank you to Dr. Mitchell Prinstein, the Chief Science Officer of the American Psychological Association. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.